welcome to this News9 special. A massive explosion rocked the Al-Ahli Arab Hospital, which was filled with hundreds of Palestinians seeking shelter in the besieged Gaza Strip. It is feared that at least 500 people have lost their lives in the Gaza hospital bombing. Both Israel and Hamas have exchanged accusations. Israel said that the hospital blast caused by rockets misfired by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, while Hamas accused Israel of carrying out the airstrike. The scene of the explosion was devastating. A video captured the entire chaos that followed after the bombing of that particular hospital. As the captured in the videos, it showed that fire engulfing the building and reducing it to rubble. According to reports, among the victims, there were also many children who had sought refuge in the hospital. Meanwhile, a blame game has ensued between Palestine and Israel over who fired the rocket that hit the hospital.
Hundreds of people have been killed in an explosion at a Gaza hospital, according to Palestinian health authorities. They say it was caused by an Israeli airstrike, while the Israeli military is blaming a failed rocket launch by the Palestinian militant group Islamic Jihad. Reuters cannot immediately verify either version of events. Tuesday's strike on the Al-Ahli Al-Arabi hospital marks the single bloodiest event in Gaza of the war between Israel and Islamist militants. Gaza authorities say more than 3,000 Palestinians have been killed in the war, including hundreds of children, and that over 1 million have been driven from their homes. This video obtained by Reuters shows paramedics transporting wounded from the hospital to another facility elsewhere in the city. Gaza is run by Hamas, whose attack on Israeli communities earlier this month killed 1,300 people and took many hostages who are still being held. The retaliatory air campaign by Israel has been relentless, flattened entire districts, and stoked a humanitarian crisis.
What happened tonight is a huge tragedy and war, ugly massacre that cannot be tolerated or allowed to pass without accountability. Tonight, Israel airstrike Al-Ahli Hospital in Gaza City.
I can confirm that an analysis of the IDF operational systems indicates that a barrage of rockets was fired by terrorists in Gaza, passing in close proximity to the Al-Ahli Al-Ma'adi hospital in Gaza at the time it was hit. Intelligence from few sources that we have in our hands indicates that the Islamic Jihad is responsible for the failed rocket launch which hit the hospital in Gaza. I repeat, this is the responsibility of Islamic Jihad that killed innocents in the hospital in Gaza.
Summit that was supposed to be held, especially with Biden, was the Jordan summit, and the Jordan summit has in fact failed. The attack on Gaza hospital has isolated Israel, is what we understand, though Israel has been denying that it was behind the attack. Arab leaders have cancelled meets with U.S. President Biden. It was expected that after the meeting with King Abdullah, we would have a meeting with el-Sisi as well as with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. But all those meetings have been called off, and the West Asian Summit, as it was called, or the Jordan Summit as it was called, has become a complete non-starter. In the summit, it was said that there were possibilities of discussions to bring some kind of tampering down of the violence, and at the same time trying to bring humanitarian aid to the residents in Gaza. Arab allies Egypt and Jordan have distanced themselves from Israel's actions. Jordan's summit was supposed to in fact be held on humanitarian grounds and for the humanitarian aid to flow into Gaza. Jordan has now said that the summit will be held when the bloodshed stops. Cancellation also reflects an increasingly volatile situation in the West Asian region, and the cancellation of the summit has sparked domestic criticism of Biden as well. Meanwhile, public opinion on the recent bombing, especially in West Asia, has become stronger. The hospital bombing has not gone down well in the Arab world, and people have been protesting in various areas such as Turkey, Lebanon and Jordan as well. The bombing of the hospital and the deaths of 500 or more, as it is being said, could result in a complete backlash against Israel. It is being said that Israel is on the diplomatic offensive, trying to prove that it was not its air raids that went ahead and resulted in the bombing of the hospital in Gaza. We're joined in, especially when it comes to the situation in West Asia, we're joined in by Skan Rajan Tayal, former ambassador. Mr. Tayal, how do you in fact see the developments in Israel as well as in West Asia? There seems to be, first of all, there was an attempt to stop the conflict from becoming wider, but it looks like the Arab countries are now coming together and they seem to be caught up in their relations with Israel. On one side, they want to in fact improve relations with Israel. On the other side, they have this huge question of Palestine. We had seen in the recent years how Jordan and Egypt have been mending their relations, but now this particular situation that is unfolding in Gaza is trying to undo all that, and there seems to be an alignment of sorts in West Asia. So how bad is this situation going to be? Is it possible to keep this conflict within its limits, or is it going to actually spread with other players coming into the picture?
Last 3-4 days after Secretary of State Anthony Blinken's visit to Israel, yesterday again he was there, and to 3-4 major Arab countries, Egypt, Qatar, Jordan, etc. It seemed that the onslaught, the major offensive of Israel in Gaza may be deferred. And it seemed that somehow they are coming together, that there should be a distinction between Hamas, the terrorist organization, and the civilian population of Gaza. But the way Israel was acting as a siege of entire Gaza with the denial of water, food, petroleum, etc., and also forced migration of people, which the United Nations has said is a war crime. Even in a war, civilian population cannot be treated like that. So suddenly the situation was changing, and that yesterday's bombing of a hospital where 500 people, civilians, were killed, has totally changed the atmospherics in the Arab countries. And again, Arab countries are trying to make it, they have no love for Hamas. Please note that Egypt or Jordan or Saudi Arabia or any other country who are ruled by kings or dictators are against Hamas, because Hamas is linked to Islamic Brotherhood and to changing the dispensations in these conservative countries. So they will not mind if Israel takes strict action against Hamas leadership and Hamas supporters. But if in that process to kill one Hamas person, they kill 100 Palestinian civilians, then the people of these countries will not take it. And second thing, America has come out very openly in favor of Israel. So it is in no position to play the role of an honest broker. It has clearly, repeatedly, we all know Anthony Blinken himself is a Jew. And when he reached Israel, first thing he said that I come here as a Jew. So there is no reason for Arab countries now to welcome Biden, because Mr. Biden should first tell Israel to stop this indiscriminate bombing of civilians. They have to be fair, they have to be just, and they have to be equitable. If they say that Hamas should not kill Israeli civilians, then equally the Israeli forces should not indiscriminately bombard and kill Palestinian civilians. So situation has deteriorated sharply, and now the Arab countries which were ready to play along with Israel and United States, that take whatever action you want against Hamas, but spare the civilians and don't inflict so much of pain on them. I think now for Arab countries to believe that Israel can be trusted or Israeli leadership can be trusted would be very difficult. And now it is again, the ball is totally in Israel's court. If 1,000 Israelis were killed, so they have already killed more than 3,000 Palestinians. Now, if they want to kill 20,000, 50,000, it is up to them. But again, there will be revenge from the Arab side. So the Israeli leadership has to pause and think how much they want to push Palestinians. And let us see how it goes. And United States has to play fair if they want to play a role of a honest broker.
But Ambassador Tayal, we have always seen how the United States has been a strong ally of Israel. It has its own domestic politics at play as well. After Israel, probably the largest Jewish population that is there as a single group is in the United States. So they are a huge political factor. They are a huge business factor as well in the United States. No U.S. president can be seen speaking against Israel or not lending the support to Israel. So that domestic factor is also at play. But doesn't Biden's challenge now be that on one side, he has his domestic audience to in fact please, but on the other side, geostrategically, there is an isolation that's creeping from the Arab world as well, who are saying that you have not condemned the way you should have condemned some of the acts of the Israeli military when it came to the Palestinians in Gaza. So that itself is going to create a distance problem, and this cancellation of meets between the US president as well as the Arab leaders is the first signal of that, isn't it?
Absolutely right. The Jews are 2.5% of the US population, but they are big financiers of both political parties. They control the media, and the America-Israel Political Action Committee is a very influential body. 9 senators out of 100 in the United States are Jews. Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State, is a Jew. Secretary of Homeland Security is a Jew. Attorney General of United States is a Jew. The Chief of Staff of President Biden himself is a Jew. So they exercise a lot of influence on American domestic politics. And in both parties, we all remember that President Trump had shifted a United States capital embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So both parties, yes, it is a very important. The election is next year. So whatever President Biden does or acts will be primarily dictated by how it will play in the American domestic politics and whether it would help him in the next year's elections. And relations with Arabs and any welfare of Palestinians are way down their list of priorities. That is the reality. But for keeping some kind of communication, they will mouth this kind of platitudes that yes, there should be a road, as President Biden said, there should be a road to a Palestine state. But they are not sincere, and Israel is not sincere. So it is for the Arab countries to decide how they want to react. And if they trust Americans, so they have been trusting Americans for the last 40 years and nothing has happened. And last 10 years, more and more settlements are being built by Israel in the West Bank also. So the policy of the present Israeli government is clear to deny the two-state solution, to which India adheres. India's official statement clearly has come that India wants or believes and supports a two-state solution. And also, of course, we are against all kinds of terrorism acts, which Prime Minister has very clearly stated. So our policy is very clear. Anything done by Hamas of terrorists or any other terrorist organization in support of Palestinian cause, absolutely we will condemn it. But India also stands for a two-state solution in Palestine, whereas we have to understand and accept that the present Netanyahu government of Israel does not believe in the two-state solution, and they have their own creeping expansionist policy of increasing the territory held by the Jews in whether it is West Bank or now they want to go into Gaza and take over half of Gaza, pushing the population in the rest of the half. So it is for the Arab countries to decide what they want to do. And yes, Iran will play in this atmosphere. China is sending an envoy. China has made very, very balanced statements. I must say this. Russia is trying to play its own, because they want the focus to shift from Ukraine to Palestine and Israel. So Russia will be very, they will be happy, because in the sense that United States attention, the European Union's attention, the whole global attention will shift from Ukraine to Israel, West Asia, Palestine, and it will give them room to do what they want.
Ambassador Tayal, I'm sorry to interject in between, but the crucial question over here is, what will the Arab world do now? Because the one thing, of course, you're sending in a signal diplomatically, but there is one factor that we are overlooking. That is how Iran is there in this particular calculus. So you already know that there is tensions between the Arab world and Iran on one side, and then Iran is actually using its proxies for the latest crisis to precipitate. So it seems that the Iran factor is also playing within the Arab political psyche.
I do not expect that the Arab world, whether it is Saudi Arabia, whether it is UAE, whether it is Jordan, whether it is Egypt, will do anything concrete. They will make all kinds of statements to pacify their own populations, but they will not take any concrete action against Israel. That is my assessment. But Iran will see it very, very carefully. And Turkey may also look at it carefully, how to extract maximum mileage to have their leadership of the Islamic world at the cost of the Saudi leadership or Egyptian leadership. And again, what action they will take, it will all depend on if Israel continues on this path of mass murder and bombardment of civilians, then Hezbollah may come in, then anything can happen. But the United States does not want a wider war. They are still dealing with Ukraine. Taiwan is simmering. China may try to do something in Taiwan. And but it is only United States which can restrain Israel and which can try to put some check on Israel. But if that does not happen, then it will give room for Iran to come into play. But they will also be very careful how far they push it. So Lebanon is there, or Hezbollah is Iran's card, and they will play it, they can play it, but perhaps the time for that has not yet come. And if there is a mass invasion of Gaza and tens of thousands of Palestinians are killed, then Hezbollah may try to enter from Lebanon into Israel.
Well, also, Ambassador, now let me also get into this aspect of how much can U.S. actually provide security for Israel. We have reports coming in that their two Striker aircraft are present in the Mediterranean, and sometimes it also means that they will have to go into territories, that is to put boots on the ground as well. Is it an option for the United States to actually intervene in this particular conflict if it comes to?
The United States will help by providing signals intelligence and blocking the signals, etc., communications of whether it is Hamas or PLO or Hezbollah in Lebanon. I do not foresee that they will really put their feet in the ground, and Israel does not need them. Israel has enough fighting force. But to block the communications and to monitor the communications among Hezbollah, etc., or if there is any kind of bombardment of there, then to, along with the Iron Dome of Israel, the anti-missile system, Americans can also try to stop those missiles by hitting them while they are en route. So it will be more moral support and support by way of providing intelligence and guidance and some exchange of information. But there is no need for American 2,000 troops. There are 6 million Israelis, and every Israeli adult, we should never forget, is a trained soldier. 2 years compulsory military service for women and 3 years compulsory military service for men. So every Israeli adult is a trained soldier. So they don't need really manpower from United States.
Well, before I let you go, Ambassador, last question to you is this, that what should we see the West Asian crisis now precipitating into? Are we going to see a lot of people sitting on the fence and making the noise only about saying that we have to give aid to the Gazans, and probably Israel still delaying that ground aspect of that invasion? So what do you think that we should be looking at West Asia in the coming days? What do you think could be the pivotal development that we should be looking for?
I think globally there is a fatigue. In the Arab world also there is a fatigue on the Palestinian issue. They just want that issue to be somehow go away. They don't really have any much deep commitment to Palestine. Similarly, European Union, and they are totally embroiled in Ukraine, and that fatigue is also setting in because they cannot have a bottomless pit. They keep on writing checks, and there is no sign of any end to the Ukraine-Russia war. The last, all those offensive and all that has totally failed. So Russia has not withdrawn 1 inch. And whatever Ukraine does, they can prolong this conflict for years. But who will pay? United States will pay, European Union will pay. So they do not want another front to open in Israel. And but Israel, perhaps they will not even restrain Israel. Israel can do what it wants in Palestine. I don't think any other country will really intervene except Iran. But Iran has its own issues, its own problems, and whatever Iran does, it will do in collusion with China and perhaps Russia. So these three will perhaps act together, and that will be, it's very difficult to predict what will happen, but only direct intervention or indirect intervention one can expect from Iran with moral and some kind of support from China and Russia.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Dayal, for in fact speaking to News9 and giving us an insight into how the West Asian crisis is actually becoming on the world stage and how it could in fact unravel in the coming days. Thank you for joining and speaking to News9. Well, moving on, U.S. President will be visiting the Middle East during this tense standoff and war in the region. Let's take a look at that report.
Stepped up support for Israel on Tuesday with plans for a visit by the president.
President Biden will visit Israel.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced the plans for Biden to visit this Wednesday.
The president will reaffirm the United States' solidarity with Israel and our ironclad commitment to its security. The president will hear from Israel what it needs to defend its people as we continue to work with Congress to meet those needs.
Blinken is himself in Tel Aviv, where he spent hours on Monday in talks with Israel's war cabinet. He said the U.S. and Israel would work on plans to get humanitarian aid into Gaza and highlighted Biden's order for U.S. military assets to head to the region to back Israel up.
President Biden will underscore our crystal clear message to any actor, state or non-state, trying to take advantage of this crisis to attack Israel. Don't.
The warning comes hours after Iran's foreign minister threatened consequences for what he called Israel's war crimes committed against the people of Gaza. Referring to regional forces opposed to Israel and the U.S. as the resistance, Hussein Amir Abdullahian told State TV, quote, "The resistance front is capable of waging a long-term war with the enemy. In the coming hours, we can expect a preemptive action by the resistance front." Meanwhile, Hamas hinted on Monday it may try to use the people its fighters kidnapped from Israel for a prisoner swap. Khaled Mishal, a top Hamas leader, told a Qatari TV channel that the group, quote, "has what it needs to free all Palestinians in Israeli prisons, roughly 6,000 people." Israel says Hamas took 199 hostages to Gaza, while the militant group says it has between 200 and 250 captives abducted from Israel during its fighters' surprise attack on October 7th. In separate comments on Monday, the group's armed wing said the non-Israelis in their captive were guests who would be released, quote, "when circumstances allow."
Well, violence escalated on the Lebanese-Israeli border yesterday. 5 fighters from Lebanon's Hezbollah group was killed in operations against Israel. Now, what we understand is that the security sources in Lebanon have also been keeping a track of the fighting that's happening between the IDF as well as the Hezbollah fighters. This recent escalation marks the most serious flare-up at the border in 17 years. The conflict began following an attack by the Palestinian Islamist group Hamas on Israel on October 7th. Israel responded with intense airstrikes on Gaza. The Israeli army reported killing 4 individuals on Tuesday who were attempting to cross the border and plant an explosive device, though the exact location was not disclosed by the IDF. Hezbollah confirmed that 5 of the fighters were killed, but it's unclear if any of them were the same individuals mentioned by Israel. Israel's army reported attacks in 3 different locations, including Metula, with no Israeli army personnel reportedly injured. Tension has been rising at Lebanon's border with Israel. Israel has also been amassing artillery pieces as well as army personnel carriers and tanks at the Lebanon border as well. This is after Hezbollah had threatened to join the war. There have been skirmishes happening between the Hezbollah fighters and the IDF at Lebanon's border.
From our understanding, it is Iran that is interested in escalating the situation in order to challenge Israel, challenge the IDF and our activities in the south. And that is why they are using the Hezbollah terrorist organization to do so. I would warn Hezbollah to look very carefully. I would also warn the leaders of Lebanon to look very carefully how we are dismantling Hamas in the Gaza Strip, leader by leader, terrorist by terrorist, and indeed infrastructure by infrastructure. We will exert a serious price if they continue to threaten and attack Israel. Nevertheless, we are prepared to fight, if needs be, on 2 fronts. We have the ability to do so. We can do it on more fronts as well. And I suggest that Lebanon take control and prevent Hezbollah from continuing their attacks against our people.
Well, Lebanon's Hezbollah has been exchanging fire with Israel across the border for days now, threatening to expand the conflict. But who are the Hezbollah and why is it connected with the Hamas group in Palestine? Take a look.
Lebanon's militant group Hezbollah has been exchanging fire with Israel across the border for days, threatening to expand a conflict between Israel and Palestinian group Hamas. But what is Hezbollah? Iran's Revolutionary Guards founded Hezbollah in 1982 in the middle of Lebanon's civil war. It was part of Iran's effort to export its Islamic revolution around the region and fight Israeli forces after their invasion of Lebanon in 1982. Hezbollah shares Tehran's Shiite Islamist ideology and went on to recruit Lebanese Shiite Muslims. The group has risen from a shadowy faction to a heavily armed force with major sway over the Lebanese state. It has ministers in government and lawmakers in parliament. Western countries, including the United States, designate Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. The U.S. holds the group responsible for a suicide bombing that destroyed U.S. Marine headquarters in Beirut in 1983, killing 241 servicemen. And Lebanese security officials and Western intelligence have said groups linked to Hezbollah carried out suicide attacks on Western embassies and kidnapped Westerners in the 1980s. Hezbollah leaders said those attacks were carried out by small groups not linked to Hezbollah. In 2021, Hezbollah leader Saeed Hassan Nasrallah said the group had 100,000 fighters. Iran gives Hezbollah weapons and money. The US estimates Iran has allocated it hundreds of millions of dollars annually in recent years. Hezbollah boasts weapons including precision rockets and drones. It demonstrated its military advances in 2006 during a 5-week war with Israel. It fired thousands of rockets into Israel during the conflict. 1,200 people were killed in Lebanon, mostly civilians, and more than 150 Israeli were killed, most of them soldiers. Many Lebanese Shiites support Hezbollah, saying the group defends Lebanon from Israel. However, Lebanese parties opposed to Hezbollah say the group unilaterally drags Lebanon into armed conflict. Hezbollah has deep ties to Hamas, another Palestinian faction backed by Iran. On October 7th, the day Hamas militants carried out an unprecedented assault into Israel, Hezbollah said it was in direct contact with the leadership of the Palestinian resistance. Since then, Hezbollah has exchanged cross-border fire with Israel numerous times.
Now, fearing a possible military escalation between Lebanon's Shiite militia, Hezbollah, and the Israeli army, many Lebanese in south of their country have fled. Now, according to eyewitnesses, several villages have been deserted as fear looms in these places that there could be an intense fighting coming up in the weeks.
This school in the city of Tyre has become a refuge for dozens of families and their children after they fled their villages in southern Lebanon. Mahmoud Nassar also felt forced to leave his home. He was concerned for the safety of his children.
For me, death is easier. Believe me when I tell you that. I do not fear for myself, as I am 51 years old. But I fear for the children.
Mahmoud's situation is like that of other displaced people here. After repeated shelling on the Lebanese-Israeli border, they all moved quickly to leave their homes.
A shell fell on someone's house in our village, and after the bombing continued near us, we gathered our belongings and left.
The disaster management unit in Tyre formed an operations room after the number of displaced people from neighbouring villages reached 900. For now, they are staying in 2 of the city's schools. There's no other shelter centre here.
It's difficult for us to meet the needs of all these people. We neither have the capacity nor the resources, and we are unable to provide them with food and medicine. We need support from the international community.
The official institutions in the city of Tyre have shut their doors because of the precarious security situation in the city and for fear of what more is to come.
Moving on, a residential building was damaged by a rocket attack from a nearby Gaza Strip. Fortunately, there have been no reported injuries despite 4 rockets causing damage to homes. Israeli authorities are advising residents of Sderot, which was previously targeted by Hamas on October 7th and is located just about 3.1 miles from the Gaza Strip's outer barriers, to evacuate the city. The rocket attack is said to have been launched from the Gaza Strip and It targeted houses near Sderot. Sderot has become the epicenter of rocket attacks on Israel. Sderot, Ashkelon, cities which are very close to the Gaza Strip, have been facing the brunt of the Hamas rocket attack. There's been a huge property damage that has also been reported from Ashkelon as well as from Sderot. Sderot was a small town that is located close to the Gaza border. The militants did attack this town, and there was heavy firing between the town's police as well as the Hamas militants. In Tel Aviv, sirens blared as rockets were fired from Gaza. My colleague Manish Jha was the person who was at the ground when the sirens were blaring. He gets you the latest.
एक बार फिर से तेल अवीव में सायरन बजे हैं। 15 मिनट पहले एक बार सायरन हुए थे, रॉकेट से हमला किया था, और अब एक बार फिर से सायरन बजे हैं, रॉकेट से हमला किया जा रहा है। और इस वक्त अगर आपको मैं बताऊं तो प्रेसिडेंट जो बाइडेन के आने से ठीक पहले जिस तरीके से तेल अवीव में लगातार महज 20 मिनट के अंदर 2-2 बार रॉकेट से हमले हुए हैं, उससे आप समझ सकते हैं कि हालत क्या है। और इस वक्त देखिए लोग जिस तरीके से यहाँ पर पहले लोग भागते हुए दिखे, सब अपने सुरक्षित ठिकानों की तरफ बैठते हुए, और TV9 की टीम इस वक्त ग्राउंड पर मौजूद है, तेल अवीव में मौजूद है। तेल अवीव में रहकर मैं इस वक्त आपको बता सकता हूं कि यहाँ की हालत क्या है। देखिए लगातार सायरन की आवाज़ और धड़ाम, और देखिए इस वक्त आवाज़ लगता है बहुत पास में ही कहीं पर आवाज़ हुई है, बहुत पास में ही, और रॉकेट के हमले की आवाज़ आई और धड़ाम से इसका मतलब है कि आयरन डोम ने उसे मार गिराया है। और अब सोचिए आधे घंटे के अंदर 2-2 बार रॉकेट से हमले, और वो भी बेहद करीब में, उस जगह पर जहां पर IDF का हेडक्वार्टर है, तेल अवीव के सिटी सेंटर के आसपास के इलाके में। जिस तरह से आयरन डोम ने मार गिराया रॉकेट को, उससे आप अंदाज़ा लगा सकते हैं कि किस तरीके से हमास लगातार तेल अवीव को टारगेट कर रहा है। और वो भी तब जब अमेरिकी राष्ट्रपति जो बाइडेन तेल अवीव पहुँचने वाले हैं महज कुछ घंटों के बाद। एक तरफ जहाँ अमेरिका के राष्ट्रपति जो बाइडेन ने ऐलान किया कि वो इजराइल के दौरे पर निकल रहे हैं, अमेरिका से अपनी यात्रा उन्होंने शुरू की, और ठीक उसी समय में यहाँ पर जो बाइडेन के विजिट के से महज कुछ घंटे पहले तेल अवीव में लगातार आधे घंटे के भीतर 2-2 बार रॉकेट से हुए हमले। ये अपने आप में हमास और इजराइल की जंग की वो कहानी बयां कर रहा है जिसको देखकर देखिए अचानक ही सायरन बजने के बाद पूरा सन्नाटा पड़ गया था। सारी जगह पर अचानक लोगों ने जो जहां पर मिला उस वक्त गाड़ियां छोड़कर वो सीधे सुरक्षित ठिकानों पर भागे, और उसके बाद अब आयरन डोम ने उसको मार गिराया, और अब चीज़ें नॉर्मल हो रही है ताकि लोग फिर सुरक्षित ठिकानों से बाहर निकलकर अपनी अपनी गाड़ी और दूसरी चीज़ों को लेकर फिर अपने डेस्टिनेशन की तरफ जा रहे हैं।
With Israeli hostages and Palestinian civilians trapped inside Gaza, overseas family members of innocent people caught in the conflict feel powerless. In Brussels, where the European Union is headquartered, our reporter was in fact there on the ground, and she was able to speak to some of them and spoke about the kind of stories that they had to say when it came to the tragedy that is occurring in Gaza. Take a look.
After a moment of silence, Israel's national anthem echoes through quiet crowds outside the European Parliament in Brussels.
We are here with the President of the European Council, the President of the European Commission, and all of you as one to express our solidarity.
Inside, a group of Israelis bustles between meetings with parliamentarians, making the case for more action. We meet Noam as she lays out photos of loved ones, 11 of whom are presumed kidnapped by Hamas.
Look at this family, okay? They are not only Israelis. Many of them, Shushan, she's a German citizen as well. We're really asking for the EU to take responsibility and bring their citizens back home.
After the horrors, now the weight is agonizing.
They burned all the houses, they killed everyone, and they took them, and we are just trying to save whoever is still alive.
The European Union says it stands with Israel, but the bloc has also warned the country against blocking supplies to Gaza.
Cutting water, cutting electricity, cutting food to a mass of civilian people is against international law. So yes, there are some actions that are not in accordance with international law.
That's why Leila Wafi is terrified too. Hailing from Gaza, we meet her at her home outside Brussels as she frantically tries to get family members out of the strip. But they're trapped.
Where can they hide? They've nowhere to run to. They're starting to run out of milk, bread, drinking water.
Leila rejects the actions of Hamas and the Israeli response.
Killing civilians has never advanced the Palestinian cause. We've always said too that killing Palestinian civilians does not make Israel safer. On both sides now we are weeping mothers. We are parents searching for our children. We are both at the mercy of extremist politics. We share the same pain, but in opposing camps.
For now, all those watching from afar can do is hold on, whether taking solace in a whispered prayer for peace or a song of hope hanging in the air.
In Tel Aviv, hundreds of relatives of people behind those being held as hostage in Gaza by the Hamas group gathered for a protest rally. They called the Israeli government to bring back their loved ones. Many still have no information about their relatives.
A sign for every hostage. More than a week after Hamas struck Israel with terror, killing and kidnapping civilians, people have come together here in Tel Aviv. Some are blaming the government. Others came in solidarity with victims' families. Maya Asraf belongs to one of them. The 24-year-old is missing 6 of her own family members.
At around 10:30 a.m., terrorists entered their home. Dozens of them, armed with knives, waving the knives at them and shouting. I spoke with Daron in the last minute, and she sent me a recording. Mai, there are terrorists here. We are alone. They are shouting.
Doron Katz is her aunt. She was taken together with her small daughters Aviv and Raz. They were visiting family in Niroz, a kibbutz close to Gaza. Ravid Katz, the uncle, is missing too, as is his elderly mother Efrat and her husband Gad Moshe Moses.
I'm here because my family has no voice right now. They are dead or kidnapped. I'm here to be their voice. I expect from the world the maximum amount of intervention.
She learned what happened through a Hamas TikTok video. Mai tells us her aunt's phone was later located in Gaza. The situation is desperate. Mai's aunt is a German citizen, but in her situation, that doesn't help. It wasn't just Israelis that Hamas killed and kidnapped. 43 different nationalities were represented among their hostages.
As many as 150 people have been abducted and are believed to still being held hostage in Gaza. Their families don't know where they are, how they are doing, and if they're even still alive.
People in Israel are united in the conviction that there needs to be a response. But what exactly this should look like, at least at this protest, isn't clear.
The Israeli government must focus first of all on doing whatever is necessary in order to release the hijacked people. Instead of focusing on trying to do some kind of revenge or whatever they are trying to do.
I think the only option we have now, unfortunately, it's to clear Gaza.
So many people in Israel understand that this blood circle is not the solution. It never was, it never will be.
At this point, though, the bloodshed seems like it is far from over.
News9's Neha Khanna speaks with a distraught mother whose 19-year-old son was taken by Hamas terrorists. She shares the harrowing details of the incident and what happened to her son.
Joining me on News9 Live today is another mother from Israel who is desperately and anxiously waiting for her son to return home safely. and she is waiting to hear where he is, what condition he is in, and has no idea, like scores of other Israelis today whose loved ones have been taken hostage by the Hamas terrorists. I'm joined now by Mayan Sherman from Israel. Her son, Ron Sherman, is 19 years old. He is an Israeli soldier. He was taken hostage by the Hamas on the 7th of October, on the day when the most horrific terror attack on Israeli soil took place. Thank you so much, Mayan, for speaking to us at what is an impossibly difficult time for you. My heartfelt condolences over all the loss of lives in Israel, and I'm really sorry to hear about your son. Please tell our viewers about your son. Tell us about Ron. Who is he? What happened? How did he get captured by the Hamas? What happened that day?
First of all, Ron is 19, as you said, he is a 19-year-old boy. He is a soldier now. As you know, all children in Israel, after they finish high school, they have to serve the army, the military service. And Ron has asthma, a very severe one. So he served as a defense soldier in the border with the Gaza Strip. His job was to help the economy of the Gazan population by he was one of he was in charge on the traders that bring the goods inside Israel and back to the Gaza Strip. He loved his job. He loved he was always happy. As a student, he was happy. This is something that is very, we hope it will help him where he is now. And our nightmare started on the morning of Saturday at 6:30 in the morning. Ron stayed in the base during that weekend, and he started texting us at 6:30 in the morning and said that he thought was a heavy missile attack on the base. He was sleeping, and when it started, so he ran with his t-shirt and shorts and flip-flops to the shelter. It's not exactly a shelter as you imagine it. It's something like a concrete wall that serves their soldiers during the missiles attack. And he ran there, and he started texting us that he was very worried because it sounded different this time. And he actually recorded us also a few videos. And I heard it, and I know the missiles because we live in we know the sounds of the missiles from Gaza because we live very close to the Gazan border, and we are used to this, unfortunately. And it sounded different. I knew it wasn't missiles, but I didn't know what it was. Afterwards, we understood it was grenades and bombings and all kinds of ammunition the terrorists used in order to get into the base. But it was very. It sounded very, very loud, and he was terrified. And I told him just stay there in this shield, in this in this concrete wall. And he asked me maybe I should go back to the dormitories where I'm sleeping, and I said no, stay there. And after a while, he wrote to me, texted me, Mom, they said that there are terrorists inside the base, and I have to admit I didn't believe him. I thought he was just imagining things. It sounded unreal, and I told him just it can't be. It's impossible. And after a while, he texted me everything. He just wrote me, I hear Arabic language outside the shelter. They are outside. They are coming to take me. I love you, Mom, and lots of red hearts. And his last words were, "It's over," and that's it. And at this time, as you can imagine, we thought it was really over, because we thought he was dead. We tried, nobody told us anything. We tried to call, whoever we can, but we didn't get any answer from anybody at this stage. After 5 hours, I think the worst in my life is really the worst in any parent's life could be. Suddenly we received the videos that the Hamas posted, that you can see Ron clearly, very healthy, alive, walking, he was taken as a hostage and taken to the Gaza Strip by barefoot. He didn't have he was just walking without, because in his t-shirt and shorts. But he looked fine. He looked okay. He was kidnapped, alive and uninjured. And it was a kind of a relief for us. Although, your son is held by a terrorist group, but at that moment it was a relief, because we knew he was alive, and until now we have hope, and this is very important for us.
My colleague Sumit Chaudhary was at the front lines in Gaza border, where the Israeli forces are preparing their forces for a possible ground invasion. Let's in fact listen into the report he has from that location.
जो हैवी व्हीकल्स हैं उनको अभी तेजी से मूव किया जा रहा है। अगर आप देखें तो मैं आपको जिस तरीके से बता रहा था कि कई आर्मर्ड व्हीकल्स हैं, या फिर जो इनके जो व्हीकल्स हैं जिससे स्ट्राइक्स करते हैं, या फिर जिससे सैनिक आगे डिप्लॉय होते हैं, उनको भी मूव किया जा रहा है। अगर आप मेरे साथ चल रहे हो तो मैं आपको एक एक लोकेशन इनकी बता रहा हूँ। और अगर आप देखें कि अभी ये पूरा कॉन्वॉय इस समय गाज़ा की तरफ मूव कर रहा है। ये वो इलाके हैं जो बैकअप एरियाज़ इनको आप कह सकते हैं, और अभी इन्हीं इलाकों से इन आर्मर्ड व्हीकल्स को या फिर आप टैंक्स को, आर्टिलरी गन्स को आगे की तरफ मूव किया जा रहा है। और अभी इसलिए ज़्यादा आपके लिए जानना ज़रूरी है कि कौन कौन से इक्विपमेंट है जो इन इलाकों में जा रहे हैं। अगर आप देखें कि अभी आपको एमवीज़ आप कह सकते हैं, गाड़ियाँ जिस तरीके से हम देखते थे उसी तरीके की गाड़ियाँ ये हैं, और अभी इन्हीं की मूवमेंट इन इलाकों में की जा रही है। अगर आप देखें दोनों तरफ आपको इस तरीके के व्हीकल नज़र आ जाएंगे, और हम आपको ये दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि आखिरकार क्या ताज़ा हालात हैं। और ये टुकड़ियाँ बनाई गई हैं, ऐसी जिसमें ना सिर्फ आर्मर्ड व्हीकल्स हैं, आर्टिलरी गन्स हैं, बल्कि इसके अलावा आप देखें कि आपको ऐसे जो बड़े बुलडोज़र या दूसरी चीज़ें भी नज़र आ जाएंगी। और इनके ऊपर अगर आप देखें तो ये कम्युनिकेशन डिवाइसेस हैं जो दुश्मन की लोकेशंस को आइडेंटिफाई करने में या उसके कम्युनिकेशंस को जैम करने के लिए भी इस्तेमाल की जाती हैं। और अभी इन इलाकों से हम दोबारा से आपको रिपोर्ट कर ये समझाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि अभी किस तरीके के ताज़ा हालात हैं। और देखिए ये अगर आप देखें, हालांकि ये मॉडिफाइड वर्जन है जिसमें आप टैंक्स, आर्टिलरी गन्स को या फिर आपके अपने लोगों को ले जा सकते हैं ये, और उन्हीं को अभी यहाँ से लाया जा रहा है। यानी टैंक्स, आर्टिलरी गन्स, आपको पूरा ज़खीरा इस समय इजराइल की सेना का, इजराइल की ज़मीनी सेना की ताकत TV9 भारतवर्ष आपको कैमरे पे दिखा रहा है और आपको बता रहा है कि अभी ऑफेंसिव ऑपरेशन जिस तरीके से तैयार किए गए हैं, क्या कुछ ताज़ा हालात यहाँ पर हैं और इस समय क्या चीज़ें हैं, क्या स्ट्रैटेजीज हैं जो इजराइल की सेना लगातार तैयार करिए। देखिए मैं फिर आपको कैमरे से एक मेरे कैमरा पर्सन निशांत आपको दिखाएं जो मेरे साथ लगातार यहाँ पर मौजूद है, मेरे साथ लगातार रिपोर्ट कर रहे हैं, मेरे साथ लगातार हर जगह मौजूद रहते हैं निशांत। और निशांत एक बार फिर कैमरे से दिखाइए जरा कि क्या कुछ तैयारी है। देखिए ये अभी एंटर कर रहे हैं लगातार उन एरियाज में गाजा के जहाँ पर हमास के एरियाज को टारगेट किया जा रहा है। मैं आपको पिछले कई दिनों से ये रिपोर्ट करके बता रहा हूँ कि बैकअप टीम्स को कैसे तैयार किया जा रहा है, बैकअप टीम्स कैसे तैयार हो रही हैं और अभी इन्हीं बैकअप टीम्स की मदद से इन इलाकों में घुसपैठ की जाएगी और फिर एक कवर अप दिया जाएगा ताकि जो सेना आगे मोर्चों पर हैं वो और आगे बढ़ जाएं और फिर धीरे धीरे गाजा के इन इलाकों को कैप्चर कर लें।
Well, we were in fact reporting in one of the biggest strikes that have happened in the Israel-Hamas war, and both of them are trading some kind of accusations against each other as who is responsible for the massive explosion that rocked Al-Hayli Arab Hospital, which was filled with hundreds of Palestinians seeking shelter in the besieged Gaza Strip. It is feared that at least 500 people have lost their lives in this Gaza hospital bombing. And in this particular attack, both Israel and Hamas have exchanged these accusations. Israel said that the hospital blast caused by rockets misfired by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, while Hamas accused Israel of carrying out with the airstrikes. Now, the scene of the explosion was devastating, as captured in videos that showed fire engulfing the building and reducing it to rubble. According to reports, among the victims there were also many children who had sought refuge in the hospital. Meanwhile, a blame game also ensued.
Hundreds of people have been killed in an explosion at a Gaza hospital, according to Palestinian health authorities. They say it was caused by an Israeli airstrike, while the Israeli military is blaming a failed rocket launch by the Palestinian militant group Islamic Jihad. Reuters cannot immediately verify either version of events. Tuesday's strike on the Al-Ahli Al-Arabi hospital marks the single bloodiest event in Gaza of the war between Israel and Islamist militants. Gaza authorities say more than 3,000 Palestinians have been killed in the war, including hundreds of children, and that over 1 million have been driven from their homes. This video obtained by Reuters shows paramedics transporting wounded from the hospital to another facility elsewhere in the city. Gaza is run by Hamas, whose attack on Israeli communities earlier this month killed 1,300 people and took many hostages who are still being held. The retaliatory air campaign by Israel has been relentless, flattened entire districts, and stoked a humanitarian crisis.
What happened tonight is a huge tragedy and war, ugly massacre that cannot be tolerated or allowed to pass without accountability. Tonight, Israel airstrike Al-Ahli Hospital in Gaza City.
I can confirm that an analysis of the IDF operational systems indicates that a barrage of rockets was fired by terrorists in Gaza, passing in close proximity to the Al-Ahli Al-Ma'adi hospital in Gaza at the time it was hit. Intelligence from few sources that we have in our hands indicates that the Islamic Jihad is responsible for the failed rocket launch which hit the hospital in Gaza. I repeat, this is the responsibility of Islamic Jihad that killed innocents in the hospital in Gaza.
Well, both Israel and Hamas have exchanged these accusations. Israel said that the hospital blasts were caused by rockets that were misfired by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, while Hamas accused Israel of carrying out with the explosion. Meanwhile, one of the crucial summits that should have happened in Jordan did not happen, and the reason for it is, of course, the hospital attack that happened on Gaza. The attack on hospital has, in fact, isolated Israel. Arab leaders cancelled meet with even the U.S. President Biden, who was supposed to be in Jordan and was supposed to have talks on what is happening in Israel as well as at the Gaza Strip, especially when it came to the war between the Hamas and Israel. Arab allies Egypt and Jordan have also distanced themselves from Israel's actions. Jordan summit was to focus on providing humanitarian aid for the Gazans, and Jordan, meanwhile, has said that the summit will take place only after the bloodshed stops. Cancellation also reflects an increasingly volatile situation in West Asia. Cancellation of the summit has also sparked domestic criticism of President Biden in the United States. Meanwhile, the public opinion over the recent bombing, and especially in West Asia, has become very strong. The hospital bombing has not gone down well in the Arab world, And people have been protesting even in Turkey, Lebanon, as well as in Jordan against the continued attack on the Palestinians. Meanwhile, U.S. President Biden will be visiting the Middle East during the tense standoff as the war escalates in the region. He will now, however, visit only Israel. Let's take a look.
As Israeli airstrikes continue to pound Gaza following the bloody attack by Hamas earlier this month, the United States stepped up support for Israel on Tuesday with plans for a visit by the president.
President Biden will visit Israel.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced the plans for Biden to visit this Wednesday.
The president will reaffirm the United States' solidarity with Israel and our ironclad commitment to its security. The president will hear from Israel what it needs to defend its people as we continue to work with Congress to meet those needs.
Blinken is himself in Tel Aviv, where he spent hours on Monday in talks with Israel's war cabinet. He said the U.S. and Israel would work on plans to get humanitarian aid into Gaza and highlighted Biden's order for U.S. military assets to head to the region to back Israel up.
President Biden will underscore our crystal clear message to any actor, state or non-state, trying to take advantage of this crisis to attack Israel. Don't.
The warning comes hours after Iran's foreign minister threatened consequences for what he called Israel's war crimes committed against the people of Gaza. Referring to regional forces opposed to Israel and the U.S. as the resistance, Hussein Amir Abdullahian told State TV, quote, "The resistance front is capable of waging a long-term war with the enemy. In the coming hours, we can expect a preemptive action by the resistance front." Meanwhile, Hamas hinted on Monday it may try to use the people its fighters kidnapped from Israel for a prisoner swap. Khaled Mishal, a top Hamas leader, told a Qatari TV channel that the group, quote, has what it needs to free all Palestinians in Israeli prisons, roughly 6,000 people. Israel says Hamas took 199 hostages to Gaza, while the militant group says it has between 200 and 250 captives abducted from Israel during its fighters' surprise attack on October 7th. In separate comments on Monday, the group's armed wing said the non-Israelis in their captive were guests who would be released, quote, when circumstances allow.
The United States has picked troops to prepare for potential deployment to the Middle East. The U.S. military has selected roughly 2,000 troops to prepare for a potential deployment to support Israel. U.S. defense officials have been closely monitoring the activity. The troops are tasked with missions like advising and medical support, and they are from across the U.S. armed services. They aren't intended to serve in a combat role. No infantry has been put or prepared to be deployed order. The troops are currently stationed both inside the Middle East and outside, including Europe. It isn't clear under what circumstances the U.S. would deploy the troops or to where, but the Pentagon decision signal it is preparing to report that these troops will be supporting the Israeli troops should Israel launch a ground incursion into Gaza. It is unclear how many of these troops should be in fact completely deployed and where they would be in Israel as well. But the officials who are in fact looking into this aspect of deployment are saying that some of them could enter the country to support the Israeli forces. A pre-deployment order doesn't mean that the troops will certainly deploy, is what some of them said, but it just shortens the time asking the troops to be ready. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin earlier had met U.S. troops in Israel and checked in on the shipment of supplies for the Israeli Defense Forces. He had told the troops he appreciated their work and said that the Israelis would likely need a lot more stuff as U.S. President Joe Biden will be visiting that country in a short while. The U.S. President is expected to hold talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and to make clear to Israel that it has the right to defend itself. Secretary of State Antony Blinken had announced on Tuesday that it would give an ironclad support to Israel's war efforts. Biden will reaffirm solidarity with Israel as well, and as it prepares for the ground offensive against Hamas terrorists in Gaza.
On Wednesday, President Biden will visit Israel. He's coming here at a critical moment for Israel, for the region, and for the world. And he's coming here to do the following. First, the President will reaffirm the United States' solidarity with Israel and our ironclad commitment to its security. President Biden will again make clear, as he's done unequivocally since Hamas's slaughter of more than 1,400 people, including at least 30 Americans, that Israel has the right and indeed the duty to defend its people from Hamas and other terrorists and to prevent future attacks. The President will hear from Israel what it needs to defend its people as we continue to work with Congress to meet those needs. Second, President Biden will underscore our crystal clear message to any actor, state or non-state, trying to take advantage of this crisis to attack Israel. Don't. To that end, he's deployed 2 aircraft carrier groups and other military assets to the region. Third, the President will continue to coordinate closely with our Israeli partners to secure the release of hostages taken by Hamas, including men, women, small children, Holocaust survivors, and American citizens, as an indispensable humanitarian effort. Fourth, President Biden will receive a comprehensive brief on Israel's war aims and strategy. Fifth, the President will hear from Israel how it will conduct its operations in a way that minimizes civilian casualties and enables humanitarian assistance to flow to civilians in Gaza in a way that does not benefit Hamas. To that end, today, and at our request, the United States and Israel have agreed to develop a plan that will enable humanitarian aid from donor nations and multilateral organizations to reach civilians in Gaza, and them alone, including the possibility of creating areas to help keep civilians out of harm's way. It is critical that aid begin flowing into Gaza as soon as possible. We share Israel's concern that Hamas may seize or destroy aid entering Gaza or otherwise preventing it from reaching the people who need it. If Hamas in any way blocks humanitarian assistance from reaching civilians, including by seizing the aid itself, we'll be the first to condemn it, and we will work to prevent it from happening again. We welcome the government of Israel's commitment to work on this plan. The President very much looks forward to discussing it further when he's here on Wednesday.
Well, the Pentagon has deployed 2 aircraft carriers to the eastern Mediterranean. Here's a closer look at what that means.
The Pentagon has deployed 2 aircraft carriers to the eastern Mediterranean, the Ford carrier and the Eisenhower carrier, along with their supporting ships. Washington says these massive warships are intended to send a message to the region as war rages on between its ally Israel and Iran-backed Palestinian militants Hamas. Here's a closer look at what that means. The Gerald R. Ford carrier is the U.S.'s newest aircraft carrier and the world's largest. It holds 5,000 sailors, a nuclear reactor, and an arsenal of missiles used to counter drones and aircraft. It can also hold more than 75 military aircraft, including fighter jets, and comes along with several supporting warships. The nuclear-powered Dwight Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group first carried out operations during Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. It has 5,000 sailors and can carry up to 9 squadrons of aircraft, like fighter jets, helicopters, and those capable of carrying out intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance operations. The carriers would bolster Washington's presence in a region that already hosts a number of U.S. military ships, planes, and troops. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Sunday the aircraft carriers are not meant to be a provocation but a deterrence to ensure the conflict does not expand throughout the region. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin called them a sign of, quote, our resolve to deter any state or non-state actor seeking to escalate this war. But it might not be seen that way to others. Turkey, a long supporter of a 2-state solution, has said the ships are meant to commit, quote, serious massacres in the Gaza Strip. And Iran has already threatened significant damages to the U.S. should the war escalate.
Meanwhile, the spokesperson for Israel's military has said that the visit by U.S. President Joe Biden would be of strategic importance for the entire Middle East. Let's listen in.
The visit of the President of the United States has strategic importance. Strategic importance for the entire Middle East, and influence in that is the most senior figure in the United States is coming to Israel at the time of war, getting review of the war situation that talks of the different scenarios in the Middle East and the steps that will need to be taken in the event that Israel change.
Well, violence escalated on the Lebanese-Israeli border yesterday. 5 fighters from Lebanon's Hezbollah group were killed in operations against Israel, according to security sources in Lebanon. This recent escalation marks the most serious flare-up at the border in 17 years. The conflict began following an attack by the Palestinian Islamic group Hamas on Israel on October 7th. Israel responded with intense airstrikes on Gaza. The Israeli army reportedly killed 4 individuals on Tuesday who were attempting to cross the border and plant an explosive device, though the exact location was not disclosed. Hezbollah confirmed that 5 of its fighters were killed, but it's unclear if any of them were the same individuals mentioned by Israel. Israel's army reportedly asked its 3 different locations soldiers to be on guard, and these particular areas include Metula. It has been said that no Israeli army personnel were injured in the ensuing firefights.
From our understanding, it is Iran that is interested in escalating the situation in order to challenge Israel, challenge the IDF and our activities in the south, and that is why they are using the Hezbollah terrorist organization to do so. I would warn Hezbollah to look very carefully. I would also warn the leaders of Lebanon to look very carefully how we are dismantling Hamas in the Gaza Strip, leader by leader, terrorist by terrorist, and indeed infrastructure by infrastructure. We will exert a serious price if they continue to threaten and attack Israel. Nevertheless, we are prepared to fight, if needs be, on 2 fronts. We have the ability to do so. We can do it on more fronts as well. And I suggest that Lebanon take control and prevent Hezbollah from continuing their attacks against our people.
Well, Lebanon's Hezbollah has been exchanging fire with Israel across the border for days, threatening to expand the conflict between Israel and Palestinian group Hamas.
Lebanon's militant group Hezbollah has been exchanging fire with Israel across the border for days, threatening to expand the conflict between Israel and Palestinian group Hamas. But what is Hezbollah? Iran's Revolutionary Guards founded Hezbollah in 1982 in the middle of Lebanon's civil war. It was part of Iran's effort to export its Islamic revolution around the region and fight Israeli forces after their invasion of Lebanon in 1982. Hezbollah shares Tehran's Shiite Islamist ideology and went on to recruit Lebanese Shiite Muslims. The group has risen from a shadowy faction to a heavily armed force with major sway over the Lebanese state. It has ministers in government and lawmakers in parliament. Western countries, including the United States, designate Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. The U.S. holds the group responsible for a suicide bombing that destroyed U.S. Marine headquarters in Beirut in 1983, killing 241 servicemen. And Lebanese security officials and Western intelligence have said groups linked to Hezbollah carried out suicide attacks on Western embassies and kidnapped Westerners in the 1980s. Hezbollah leaders said those attacks were carried out by small groups not linked to Hezbollah. In 2021, Hezbollah leader Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah said the group had 100,000 fighters. Iran gives Hezbollah weapons and money. The US estimates Iran has allocated it hundreds of millions of dollars annually in recent years. Hezbollah boasts weapons including precision rockets and drones. It demonstrated its military advances in 2006 during a 5-week war with Israel. It fired thousands of rockets into Israel during the conflict. 1,200 people were killed in Lebanon, mostly civilians, and more than 150 Israeli were killed, most of them soldiers. Many Lebanese Shiites support Hezbollah, saying the group defends Lebanon from Israel. However, Lebanese parties opposed to Hezbollah say the group unilaterally drags Lebanon into armed conflict. Hezbollah has deep ties to Hamas, another Palestinian faction backed by Iran. On October 7th, the day Hamas militants carried out an unprecedented assault into Israel, Hezbollah said it was in direct contact with the leadership of the Palestinian resistance. Since then, Hezbollah has exchanged cross-border fire with Israel numerous times.
My colleague Sumit Chaudhary was at the front lines where the Israeli army is preparing for its ground offensive. He has this report. Let's listen in.
जो हैवी व्हीकल्स हैं उनको अभी तेजी से मूव किया जा रहा है। अगर आप देखें तो मैं आपको जिस तरीके से बता रहा था कि कई आर्मर्ड व्हीकल्स हैं या फिर जो इनके जो व्हीकल्स हैं जिससे स्ट्राइक्स करते हैं या फिर जिससे सैनिक आगे डिप्लॉय होते हैं उनको भी मूव किया जा रहा है। अगर आप मेरे साथ चल रहे हो तो मैं आपको एक एक लोकेशंस इनकी बता रहा हूँ। और अगर आप देखें कि अभी ये पूरा कॉन्वॉय इस समय गाज़ा की तरफ मूव कर रहा है। ये वो इलाके हैं जो बैकअप एरियाज़ इनको आप कह सकते हैं और अभी इन्हीं इलाकों से इन आर्मर्ड व्हीकल्स को या फिर आप टैंक्स को, आर्टिलरी गन्स को आगे की तरफ मूव किया जा रहा है। और अभी इसलिए ज़्यादा आपके लिए जानना ज़रूरी है कि कौन कौन से इक्विपमेंट है जो इन इलाकों में जा रहे हैं। अगर आप देखें कि अभी आपको हैवीज आप कह सकते हैं गाड़ियाँ जिस तरीके से हम देखते थे उसी तरीके की गाड़ियाँ ये हैं और अभी इन्हीं की मूवमेंट इन इलाकों में की जा रही है। अगर आप देखें दोनों तरफ आपको इस तरीके के व्हीकल नज़र आ जाएंगे और हम आपको ये दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि आखिरकार क्या ताज़ा हालात हैं। और ये टुकड़ियाँ बनाई गई हैं, ये टुकड़ियाँ बनाई गई हैं ऐसी जिसमें ना सिर्फ आर्मर्ड व्हीकल्स हैं, आर्टिलरी गन्स हैं, बल्कि इसके अलावा आप देखें कि आपको ऐसे जो बड़े बुलडोज़र या दूसरी चीज़ें भी नज़र आ जाएंगी। और इनके ऊपर अगर आप देखें तो ये कम्युनिकेशन डिवाइसेस हैं जो दुश्मन की लोकेशंस को आइडेंटिफाई करने में या उसके कम्युनिकेशंस को जैम करने के लिए भी इस्तेमाल की जाती हैं। और अभी इन इलाकों से हम दोबारा से आपको रिपोर्ट कर ये समझाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि अभी किस तरीके के ताज़ा हालात हैं। और देखिए ये अगर आप देखें हालांकि ये मॉडिफाइड वर्जन है जिसमें आप टैंक्स, आर्टिलरी गन्स को या फिर आपके अपने लोगों को ले जा सकते हैं ये और उन्हीं को अभी यहाँ से लाया जा रहा है। यानी टैंक्स, आर्टिलरी गन्स, आपको पूरा ज़खीरा इस समय इजराइल की सेना का, इजराइल की ज़मीनी सेना की ताकत TV9 भारतवर्ष आपको कैमरे पे दिखा रहा है और आपको बता रहा है कि अभी ऑफेंसिव ऑपरेशन जिस तरीके से तैयार किए गए हैं, क्या कुछ ताज़ा हालात यहाँ पर हैं और इस समय क्या चीज़ें हैं, क्या स्ट्रैटेजीज हैं जो इजराइल की सेना लगातार तैयार करी है। देखिए मैं फिर आपको कैमरे से एक मेरे कैमरा पर्सन निशांत आपको दिखाएं जो मेरे साथ लगातार यहाँ पर मौजूद है, मेरे साथ लगातार रिपोर्ट कर रहे हैं, मेरे साथ लगातार हर जगह मौजूद रहते हैं निशांत। और निशांत एक बार फिर कैमरे से दिखाइए जरा कि क्या कुछ तैयारी है। देखिए ये अभी एंटर कर रहे हैं लगातार उन एरियाज में गाजा के जहाँ पर हमास के एरियाज़ को टारगेट किया जा रहा है। और मैं आपको पिछले कई दिनों से ये रिपोर्ट करके बता रहा हूँ कि बैकअप टीम्स को कैसे तैयार किया जा रहा है, बैकअप टीम्स कैसे तैयार हो रही हैं और अभी इन्हीं बैकअप टीम्स की मदद से इन इलाकों में घुसपैठ की जाएगी और फिर एक कवर अप दिया जाएगा ताकि जो सेना आगे मोर्चों पर हैं वो और आगे बढ़ जाएं और फिर धीरे धीरे गाजा के इन इलाकों को कैप्चर कर लें।
A family who had fled their home in Gaza City decided to return despite the dangers. Israel had ordered civilians to head south to avoid the bombardment, but after an airstrike hit the house next to their shelter, they said that they rather face the risk at home. Overnight bombings in the crowded southern Gaza Strip has taken a heavy toll, and the family is among several other, as news agencies report, that believe that it's better to return to their homes in the north than to be fleeing towards the south. With more than a dozen family members squeezed into a car on the outskirts of Khan Yunis, the main gate of the southern Gaza, this family has in fact packed their belongings on the roof for this perilous journey back through the ongoing bombardment. Explosions and thick clouds of smoke were seen across the Gaza skyline as Israel prepared to escalate an offensive against the Hamas terrorists, which has set off a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Raised fears of a broader conflict with Iran. Israel has attacked around 5,000 Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip since October 7th and has cancelled a large number of other strikes in an effort to avoid Palestinian civilian casualties. This is what the Israeli officials monitoring the operations have said, that they are cautiously picking up their targets, and several operations against Hamas were cancelled because of the fear that it could lead to collateral damage as well as risk to the Palestinian civilian population in the region. My colleague Manish Jha was at the Rafah crossing, and he brings out the report about the road leading towards that particular crossing and why is it important for the Palestinians. Take a look.
TV9 भारतवर्ष की टीम इस वक्त राफा क्रॉसिंग पर है। ये वो जगह है जो इजराइल का वो पॉइंट है जहां पर गाजा पट्टी और इजिप्ट के बीच का रास्ता खुलता है। फिलहाल दुनिया के केंद्र में बन गया है ये जगह, वो इसलिए क्योंकि गाजा पट्टी में 600 के करीब अमेरिकन सिटीजन हैं। इसके अलावा जो तमाम विदेशी गाजा पट्टी में फंसे हैं उनको निकालने के लिए अमेरिका और दूसरे देश चाहते हैं कि राफा क्रॉसिंग के जरिए इजिप्ट में निकलने का उनको मौका दिया जाए। वहीं दूसरी तरफ इजिप्ट में सैकड़ों की संख्या में ट्रक राहत सामग्री लेकर इंतजार कर रहे हैं कि वो गाजा पट्टी के अंदर घुसे। ये सब कुछ होगा कहां से? इस जगह से जहां पर TV9 का कैमरा आपको दिखाई दे रहा है। वहीं दूसरी तरफ देखिए, जो लगातार यहाँ पर ट्रैफिक है उसमें लगातार जो आर्मी के व्हीकल्स हैं, टैंक और दूसरी और तमाम चीज़ें दिखाई देती है। बहुत बड़ा बेस यहाँ पर है जहाँ पर कि मैंने खुद ही हजारों के करीब में सोल्जर्स को देखा। तो ये राफा क्रॉसिंग के पॉइंट से TV9 आपको रिपोर्ट करके बता रहा है कि आज की तारीख में सिचुएशन क्या है। और खबर यही है कि अभी फिलहाल जब ईरान के विदेश मंत्री ने यह दावा किया है कि हमास अपने 200 बंधकों को छोड़ने के लिए तैयार है, बशर्ते कि हमास की शर्त मानी जाए और इजराइल एयर स्ट्राइक न करे। इन सब के केंद्र बिंदु में अब अगले डेवलपमेंट का इंतजार है, जब राफा क्रॉसिंग में बहुत कुछ आपको देखने को मिलेगा। सबसे पहले जो अमेरिकन सिटीजन हैं उनकी रिहाई इस क्रॉसिंग से होते हुए दिखेगी।
Meanwhile, protests in support of the Palestinians continue to grow. Protesters take to the streets in Sana'a, Yemen, in support of the Palestinians. Hundreds of people hit the streets of Yemen to stage a protest against Israel.
إلى استشهاد المئات من أبناء الشعب الفلسطيني. يا أمتنا طبعا كيف واجب ننصف إسرائيل. يا أمتنا طبعا كيف.
My colleague Sumit Chowdhury is at the ground where the IDF is preparing for the ground assault. He reports on IDF's preparations. Let's take a look.
और इस समय एक बार फिर TV9 भारतवर्ष आपको लेकर आया है यहाँ पर फ्रंट लाइन के एरिया के अंदर, और मैं आपको दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ कि इस समय टैंक्स और आर्टिलरी किस तरीके से तैयारी कर रही है इन इलाकों में जाने की। अगर आप देखें, ये टैंक्स है जो करीबन हैवी टैंक्स है इसके, और अभी थोड़ी देर में टैंक्स मूव किए जा रहे हैं। अगर आप देखें, सैनिक लगातार तैयारी कर रहे हैं फ्रंट लाइन पे जाने की, और ये पहली तस्वीरें TV9 भारतवर्ष आपको दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहा है और ये भी बता रहा है कि आखिरकार इस समय क्या तैयारियां यहाँ चल रही हैं। और मैं इस समय मौजूद हूँ, आप देख रहे हो कि ये मार्क 4 टैंक्स हैं इजरायली सेना के, और अभी इनका इस्तेमाल खासतौर पर किया जा रहा है युद्ध के क्षेत्रों में। और इन टैंक्स और आर्टिलरी गन्स के साथ मैं यहाँ मौजूद हूँ और मैं आपको दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ कि आखिरकार इस समय कैसे ताज़ा हालात हैं यहाँ पर। अगर आप देखें, वो लगातार लाइव फायर वहाँ से किया जा रहा है आर्टिलरी गन से और टैंक्स की मदद से। और अगर अब ये आप तस्वीरें मैं और मेरे कैमरा पर्सन आपको दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहे हो तो क्या इस समय मौजूद हैं, क्या इस तरीके से सपोर्ट दिया जा रहा है, ये भी आप देख सकते हैं। देखिए, ये वो लोकेशंस है जहाँ से लगातार इस समय फायर किया जा रहा है। और मैं अकेला TV9 भारतवर्ष आपको ऐसा चैनल है जो आपको लगातार इन इलाकों से ये तस्वीरें दिखा रहा है। अगर आप देखें, एक और फिर तैयारी की जा रही है, शेल्स को डाला जा रहा है और उसके बाद उसको फायर किया जाएगा। और हम आपको दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि इस समय इजरायली सेना किस तरीके से अपनी तैयारियां कर रही है। और ये आपके लिए देखना बहुत ज़रूरी है, क्योंकि आप ये देखकर समझ सकते हैं कि अभी किस तरीके की तैयारियां यहाँ पर चल रही है। देखकर आप एक बार फिर से अभी एक रॉकेट से यानी RPG से लगातार फायर किया जा रहा है। और मोटे तौर पर अगर आप देखें तो यहाँ पर किस तरीके से एनिमी लोकेशंस को टारगेट किया जा रहा है, इसकी पहली तस्वीरें हम आप तक दिखा रहे हैं। यानी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है एक बार फिर आपके लिए समझना कि अभी जो गाज़ा पट्टी में किस तरीके की स्ट्रैटेजीज इस समय इजरायली सेना की है। और अगर आप देखें कि रॉकेट लॉन्चर्स या फिर दूसरी आर्टी शेल्स की मदद से लगातार इस तरीके के फायर किए जा रहे हैं। अगर आप देख रहे हैं कि अभी इसी तरीके से एक रॉकेट को उसकी मुठा में डाला गया और अब से थोड़ी देर में उसको दोबारा से फायर किया जाएगा। ये इसलिए क्योंकि अलग अलग लोकेशंस पे किस तरीके से फायर किया जा रहा है, क्या लोकेशंस है, ये आपके लिए देखना और समझना बहुत ज़रूरी है। देखिए कई पैराफेरल यानी कई फ्रंटलाइंस लोकेशंस को तैयार किया गया है, ऐसी फ्रंटलाइंस लोकेशंस को जो इस समय गाज़ा पट्टी के बेहद करीब है और इन्हीं फ्रंटाइज लोकेशन से फायर किया जा रहा है। अभी आप मोटे तौर पे समझिए कि इनकी जो रेंज है यानी फर्स्ट लेयर जो आपकी कह सकते हैं कि ऑफेंसिव ऑपरेशंस, ये फर्स्ट लेयर ऑफ ऑफेंसिव ऑपरेशंस है जहां से ये फायर किया जा रहा है। अगर आप एक बार फिर अगर देखें और आपको समझ में आएगा कि अभी क्या कुछ ताज़ा हालात हैं यहाँ के। हालांकि देखिए हमको बोला गया है कि देखिए अगर आप देखें ये फायर करने वाला है थोड़ी देर में और इसके बाद यहाँ से इन लोकेशंस को बदला जाता है। देखिए ये कोशिश की जाती है डिफेंस फोर्सेस में कि जब आप फायर कर लें तो वहाँ से दूसरी लोकेशन की तरफ निकल जाएं, क्योंकि एक बार आपकी लोकेशन को ट्रैक कर लिया, आपको पता लग गया तो फिर आपके लिए बेहद मुश्किल हो जाता है। देखिए अगर फिर मैं आपको बता रहा था कि किस तरीके की तैयारी यहाँ पर इस समय फोर्सेज की, और देखिए कुछ ही देर में फायर करने वाला और अगर आप देखें आपको नजर आएगा कि ये फायरिंग चल रही है। इस समय मौजूद हूँ मैं इस समय फ्रंट लाइन के उन ऑफेंसिव ऑपरेशंस में जहाँ से फोर्सेस का ये टारगेट किया जा रहा है। यानी एक बार फिर TV9 भारतवर्ष आपको ऐसा चैनल है जो आपको लगातार इन लोकेशन से दिखा रहा है, बता रहा है कि आखिरकार किस तरीके की चीजें इस समय यहाँ पर मौजूद है।
Well, the big story that we have been tracking is with regards to the explosion that rocked the Al-Ahli Arab Hospital, which was filled with hundreds of Palestinians seeking shelter in the besieged Gaza Strip. This is the big story that we are tracking at the hour, and what we understand is that around 500 people have lost their lives in the Gaza hospital bombing in this deadly attack. Both Israel and Hamas have exchanged the accusations as to who is responsible for this deadly attack on this hospital. Meanwhile, there has been a growing chorus of protests against Israel for targeting this particular hospital, but however the Israelis have denied carrying out any kind of an operation that targeted this hospital. They are saying that it's a misfire rocket that has hit the hospital and that they are not to be blamed for what happened at this particular hospital. Israel said that the hospital blast caused by the rockets misfired by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad needs to be probed into, and they have said that it is not their armed forces who are responsible for the strike. The scene of the explosion was devastating, as captured in the videos that showed the fire engulfing the building and reducing it to rubble. This is what the reports in fact show about the kind of situation that are there. It is also being said that there were also many children who had surfaced in the hospital when this attack took place.
I can confirm that an analysis of the IDF operational systems indicates that a barrage of rockets was fired by terrorists in Gaza, passing in close proximity to the El-Hali al-Ma'adi hospital in Gaza at the time it was hit. Intelligence from few sources that we have in our hands indicates that the Islamic Jihad is responsible for the failed rocket launch which hit the hospital in Gaza. I repeat, this is the responsibility of Islamic Jihad that killed innocents in the hospital in Gaza.
News9's Neha Khanna engaged in a conversation with Palestinian woman Hadil Kazaz, shedding light on the dire situation in Gaza. Hadil shares first-hand accounts painting a grim picture that feels nothing short of a nightmare for the Gazans.
To talk about how desperate and nightmarish the situation in Gaza currently is, we're now joined on News9 Live by Hadil Kazaz. She is a Palestinian woman who works with Oxfam and joins us now from the West Bank. Hadil, first and foremost, thank you very much for joining us at a very difficult time. May I begin by asking you, according to the information that you have, because you are so close to that area, how bad is the situation in Gaza? There are a lot of reports coming in that tell us that it's an absolute nightmare. for the Gazans. Tell us, what is the
Yes.
latest you have?
The situation is something that we have never seen, not in Palestine, not in other conflicts that we are aware of. Oxfam colleagues have been working with difficult conflicts all over the world, but all of them agree that this is unforeseen, unprecedented type of situation. Not only because of everything is destroyed in Gaza, all infrastructures, roads, hospitals, schools, homes, the death toll is so high. It's higher than Ukraine war so far. It's higher than any other war that happened in recent years in across the world, around the world. And because of the dire situation and the needs for services, basic services, including water, including food, medication, any kind of basic needs are not there anymore. And people are crying for days now because they don't have access to these basic needs. Soon we will have news about deaths due to lack of water and lack of food, not only because of bombardments.
It is a terrible situation. Would it be correct to say, Hadil, that the real death toll is likely to be much higher than what is being reported? Because we are told that there are many dead bodies that are lying buried under the rubble of collapsed buildings. These are bodies that have not even been counted. Is that correct?
Yes. These things we also hear, but unfortunately Oxfam had to suspend all its operations in Gaza because all our colleagues and partners are not able to move for their safety. 11 of our colleagues who work in the Gaza Strip are lost their homes or evacuated their homes, and their homes are partially or totally destroyed. Now, the 33 colleagues we have in the Gaza Strip, they are not able to assess or to do any kind of humanitarian work because they themselves are in need of humanitarian assistance. So unfortunately, the news we hear that maybe the death toll will rise for thousands or hundreds, we don't know, but we cannot also verify this because we cannot operate in the region.
I understand what you're saying. Talk to us a little bit in detail about the siege, the total siege and the impact that it has had, apart from the relentless bombings, which have caused many, many, many deaths. You were talking about how people have no food, water, fuel, electricity. It's a desperate situation, no medicines. Tell us about that. How bad is it?
So this war comes to Gaza Strip, which is already a vulnerable and very poor and very highly populated region, in the occupied Palestinian territories. For 16 years before this war, the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip didn't have access to movement, freedom of movement, to travel, high unemployment rates, high poverty rates. 80% of the population of the Gaza Strip were below poverty line. So it is already a dire situation where electricity was coming to people only 4 hours. People couldn't store food because they don't have money and they don't have electricity. So the situation was already bad. 90% of Gaza water is not suitable for human consumption, even before this war. Now we add to this the challenge that the water bombs, the water network is totally destroyed because of the bombardment. We add to this the fact that the electricity was cut since October 12. If there are few pockets in the Gaza Strip which has either renewable energy like solar panels or generators, but even these are running out of electricity. So people are in total darkness, no access to clean water anymore. There is no possibility to treat even injuries. There were 10,000 injured people in a Shifa hospital alone. One of my cousins got injured because the house next to her was bombarded, and stones and rocks fell on her, and she was badly injured. She went to the Shifa hospital and was treated for first aid only and sent home. For 3 days she was in coma, and the family had to evacuate her to a safer space.
But there is no safe space because even in the south, bombardments continue. Just this morning, next to one place where my sister evacuated to, 28 people died in a house bombardment next to her. And this keeps people feeling that there's no safe space at all. And wherever they go, they are going to die anyway. Whole families were wiped completely, totally from civil records, like the parents, the children, the grandchildren, the grandparents. They died. In one case, 70 from one family evacuated together to one building, and they all died. So it is
70?
very...
Did you say 70 people of one family?
Yes, extended family. So the siblings, the married siblings and their children and grandchildren, they all joined together and evacuated to a place which they thought it would be safer in the south, but their house was bombed and they all died. In another case, 44 people died as well. So it's these scary numbers. It's that makes us feel that, of course, there's no safe space at all. No place is safe in the Gaza Strip at the moment.
The IDF has given an update with regard to the operations being carried out in the Gaza Strip. Let's listen into what they had to say.
And confirm that the Islamic Jihad was responsible for the strike at the al-Madani hospital in Gaza. We did an immediate review with all relevant branches of the IDF. This is what took place on Tuesday, October 17th. At 6:15 p.m., a barrage of rockets was fired by Hamas to Israel. Then, at 6:59 p.m., a barrage of around 10 rockets was fired by Islamic Jihad from a nearby cemetery. It was at the time that 6:59 p.m. when there were reports of an explosion at the al-Mahadani hospital in Gaza City. According to our intelligence, Hamas, the reports, understood it was an Islamic Jihad rocket that had misfired and decided to launch a global media campaign to hide what really happened. They went as far as inflating the numbers of casualties. They understood with absolute certainty that it was a rocket misfired by Islamic Jihad that damaged the hospital. Analysis of our aerial footage confirms that there was no direct hit to the hospital itself. The only location damage is outside the hospital in the parking lot, where we can see signs of burning, which I will show later, no cratering, and no structural damage to nearby buildings, as opposed to the damage caused by any aerial munition, which would have been of different nature. We would have seen craters and structural damage to the buildings, both of which haven't been identified in this incident. The size of the damage we see here is due to the warhead of the Islamic Jihad rocket, but most of the rocket's propellant is still evident due to the short flight of the rocket because the launch failed. The following visual evidence shows infrared imagery of the parking lot. You can see the central locations of fires, some debris of rooftops, no craters can be identified. I want to show you that myself. This is the area of the hospital. Okay? We are showing the parking lot and the hospital. Okay? Those are in red spots. This is not in infrared, so you can understand it better. This is the parking lot. This is the parking lot. You can see the parking lot also now in this picture shown here. Okay? Aftermath. After the hit. There is no structural damage to the building. The walls stayed intact. There are no craters here. All of the above, which I said, no structural damage. The walls stay intact. No craters. These are the characterized as shows that it is not an aerial munition that has hit the parking lot. We also have examples of what air-to-ground munition creator looks like. As you can see, they do not exist in this instance. Many media outlets immediately reported the unverified claims by Hamas. Those were lies spread by Hamas. I want to make something clear. It is impossible to know what happened as quickly as Hamas claimed they knew. That should have been an initial warning sign for many. Unlike Hamas, the IDF launched an immediate examination, which was overseen at the very highest levels of command. This professional review was based on intelligence, operational systems, and aerial footage, all of which we cross-checked. The evidence, which we are sharing with you all, confirms that the explosion of the Ali al-Mahadani hospital in Gaza was caused by an Islamic Jihad rocket that was misfired.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed horror over the Gaza hospital blast, strongly condemning the incident. Palestinian officials claim it was an Israeli airstrike, while Israel attributed to the failed rocket launch by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group. Now, Guterres also condemned the Hamas attacks on Israeli civilians, calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. He made appeals to both Hamas and Israel to alleviate the ongoing human suffering while attending the Belt and Road Forum in Beijing with world leaders.
Immediately before departing for Beijing, I made two urgent humanitarian appeals to Hamas for the immediate and unconditional release of the hostages, to Israel to immediately allow unrestricted access of humanitarian aid to respond to the most basic needs of the people of Gaza, the overwhelming majority of whom are women and children. They cannot justify the acts of terror against civilians committed by Hamas on October 7 that I immediately condemned. But those attacks cannot justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. Each of my two humanitarian appeals have a value in themselves. They are not bargaining chips, they are simply the right things to do. And I am horrified by the hundreds of people killed at Al-Ahli hospital this same day in Gaza by a strike that I strongly condemned earlier today.
Well, the IDF continues to call on the residents of northern Gaza Strip as well as the Gaza City to evacuate towards the area of Al-Mawazi, that is south of Wadi Gaza. The IDF recommends evacuating to the open areas in western Khan Yunis in the area of Al-Mawazi, is what we understand.
Protect them. We recommend moving to open areas in western Khan Yunis. And in recent days, the IDF has been calling on the residents of the northern Gaza Strip to evacuate their homes and to move to the south of Wadi Gaza. These measures were taken to protect them. We recommend moving to open areas in western Khan Yunis, and if necessary, international humanitarian aid will be sent there. Hamas is trying to prevent the population from evacuating northern Gaza. Hamas continues to bring destruction upon Gaza and to endanger its residents. We repeat our recommendation. Anyone located in the northern part of Gaza Strip should move to the south.
Well, moving on from a story with regards to the climate change that's happening and affecting one of the mightiest river systems in the world, the Amazon River. Well, the Amazon River fell to its lowest level in over a century on Monday. This is a severe drought that is in fact continuing to upend the lives in the Brazilian rainforest. It has left both stranded, cutting off food and water supplies to remote villages as well. The port of Manaus recorded around 44.6 feet of water. compared to 57.7 feet of water a year ago. This is the lowest level since records began in 1902. Rapidly drying tributaries to the mighty Amazon have left boats stranded, cutting off food and water supplies to remote villages, while high water temperatures are suspected of killing more than 100 endangered river dolphins. The port of Manaus, the region's most populous city at the meeting of the Rio Negro and of the Amazon River, recorded 13.59 meters of water compared to 17.60 a year ago, according to a website that keeps track of the record of water in these areas. That is the lowest level since records began in 1902, passing a previous all-time low set in 2010. The drought has affected 481,000 people, according to the Civil Defense Agency in the state of Amazonas, where Manaus is located. Well, that's all in this edition of the Bulletin, but stay tuned to News 9 as we bring you the latest when it comes to the Israel-Hamas conflict and other news from across the world and as well from India.
Delhi has the fastest growing metro network among G20 nations. From 6 stations in 2002, it today has 286 stations. Reliability, cleanliness and affordability have set the template for other Indian metros. The architect of this modern-day world-class marvel is E. Sridharan. Watch the extraordinary life of Metro Man E. Sridharan streaming now on News9 Plus. Download now.
Hello everyone, Namaskar. I'm music composer Ricky Cage. 3-time Grammy Award winner and a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador. And you're watching me on First Person on News9 Plus.